who will be speaking on, do promoters really want independent directors? R. Gopalkrishnan studied physics at Kolkata University, engineering at IIT Kharagpur, and attended the advanced management program at Harvard Business School. He's been a professional manager from 1967. Served as chairman of Unilever Arabia, as MD of Brooke Bond Lipton, and vice chairman of Hindustan Lever, and as director of Tata Sons and several Tata companies. He serves as an independent director and non-executive chairman of Castrol India, and also as an independent director of PTI. He is actively engaged in both instructional and inspirational speaking. He has authored 16 books. Gopal has been a newspaper columnist and continues to write every month for financial papers. One of the articles which I referred before. He has also authored 16 books since 2007. Please do stay tuned for release of yet another book from him on the behavioral aspects of corporate governance in the coming days. Gopal has been a corporate leader for 53 years, 31 years in Unilever and 17 years in Tata. Served in Jeddah as chairman of Unilever Arabia, in Bangalore as managing director of Brooke Bond Lipton and vice chairman of Hindustan Lever. He is actively engaged in both instructional and inspirational speaking. Welcome, sir, and look forward to great insights from you on whether the promoters really want independent directors. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Raj. I hope I'm visible and I'm audible.
You are audible and visible, sir.
I'm very grateful to CFA Society for inviting me to share some of my thoughts. I've chosen a slightly provocative title, and I meant it, of course. I didn't choose it just to be provocative. I have finished, now this year is drawing to a close, 34 years of board membership in over 25 companies, both in India and abroad. And I have served in all capacities, as executive director, as CEO, as independent director, as chairman, you name it, I have sort of played that role. And it's an age and a time when I'm able to reflect back on my experiences and ask myself some questions and try to provide some guidance or viewpoint. That's what I propose to do over the next 25 minutes. And then we can open it up for questions and answers as the audience may want to ask. We have about 7,200 companies, as far as I'm aware, on the listed companies in the National Stock Exchange. And we have a very skewed stock exchange. Most of you are financial analysts, so you know this better than myself. Just a handful of them, maybe 20 of them, account for 60-70% of the profits of the market cap. Probably a handful of them, 15-20, are distributed shareholding. Otherwise, most of them are owned by one dominant shareholder. The dominant shareholder may be a family or it may be a multinational company. There is a natural tension amongst the players in the boardroom between the management, represented by the CEO and CFO, on the one hand, the promoter directors or the nominee directors of the major shareholder, the independent directors, and if there are any nominee directors, the nominee directors. But all of them have one mantra which they have to follow, both under the law and both morally, which is that they must think of the multiple stakeholders in the company and not about whom they are representing. Now, that's not always followed. And in the introductory comment, Raj mentioned some of the things that come up. It comes because there's a parallax. Some people think they must represent the promoter because that's where some of the nominee directors, especially from government, think they must represent the government. And you get a cockeyed situation developing in the board, as you're seeing right now in Z Entertainment or Dish TV and Future Retail. These are all examples where different directors are seeing things in different ways, without my commenting or judging who's right and who's wrong. So I asked myself the question that here we are sitting around, we understand the business. We have the responsibility and the fiduciary duty. Before it became mandatory to have independent directors, how did promoters, even in they'll have nothing much to contribute. And ultimately, when it became mandatory, run professional companies think about independent directors. And frankly, you said, okay, what is the formula? And you appoint that many independent directors. You try to choose. It was not a great idea. Why do you want these guys? They don't understand the business. Choose marquee names. And if you're required to have some of them as women, you try to get them as women. But these were all in a condescending sort of way. Not because promoters are bad people, but that's human nature. If I don't have to do something, there are many business families where the women in the family are not allowed to join the business. So that's, you can call it condescending, or you can call it some steadfast commitment to a tradition which has existed from olden days. So the real answer is, in order for promoters to really want independent directors, there has to be a shift in the mindset of promoters. And the shift in the mindset cannot be by legislation, though it is there by regulation and they are following in law. I mean, if I have to get a woman director and I get my daughter-in-law, and if I have to get an independent director and the definition of independent director says, my brother-in-law's sister-in-law's brother-in-law is not related to me, so I get him as an independent director, then I'm finding ways around it. Now, what is the shift of mindset that I have found progressive companies undertaking, whether they are promoters or otherwise, because there is a nomination and remuneration committee anyway. The shift of mindset has three aspects which I would like to highlight. The first is a shift of mindset from efficient board meetings to effective board meetings. I will touch upon all the three and then I'll come back to explain in a few words. So the shift in mindset from efficient to effective. The second thing that I think in the mindset shift required is to welcome debate from diversity, different board dynamics than when you're grudgingly including them. Not tolerate it, but welcome it. And the third one is to encourage people to disagree, but without becoming disagreeable. If you can, so let me say one or two words just to explain, and then in the questions, if necessary, we can expand upon it. I make a distinction between efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency, shift your pivot in your mind to welcome these three things, then you get is the shortest distance between 2 points. So if you're standing on top of a mountain and you want to run down the mountain slope, the most efficient way is to come in a straight line. But water doesn't come in a straight line. Water comes in a curving way. It takes the slopes, it looks at the underlying terrain and finds the most effective way to come down, even though it's not the shortest way. That's how the Ganga flows from Gangotri to the Sundarbans in West Bengal. So when you have a family without any independent directors, you can look for efficiency because everybody is beholden to the Lalaji or the Kakaji. But when you have independent directors who are not beholden, then the debate takes a while longer. Democracy is about effectiveness, not about efficiency. Autocracies are far more efficient. The second point I mentioned was about welcoming debate from diversity. This is actually culturally an Indian strength. India is the only country compared to all the Western countries where debate and dissent is actually encouraged. Even in religious matters, the Gautam Buddha used to say, don't accept what I'm saying because I had enlightenment under a tree. Debate it, question it. The Hindu Dharam says the same thing, Tarka Vitarka, please debate it. Unlike some of the canonic religions from the Middle East, where they say God handed over this tablet or this particular book, so that's immutable. We don't have that. So Indians tend to be very long-winded and argumentative. And Amartya Sen has written that book, The Argumentative Indian, to explain this very well. So the fact of the matter is, we are a diverse people, and we have, in cultural terms, always welcomed diversity and debate. But when it comes to the boardroom, we don't behave that way. Boardroom, we want to behave in a more Anglo-Saxon or American way. We want efficiency. And the third point that I had made was encourage disagreement without becoming disagreeable. And what I mean by that is it's a skill. Not everybody is able to disagree. They'd rather not agree or disagree. They'll keep quiet. And one of our sages has said in the past, if you fail to speak up when you're required to speak, that it's also an act of dishonesty. So these are the kind of factors that I thought I would just mention. And over my 34 years, lots of things have changed. Frankly, 34 years ago, we didn't even know the word, I didn't know the word corporate governance. I don't know what the hell it meant. I didn't know what's a nominations committee and so on and so forth. Over a period of time, the legislation has evolved, the public debate has evolved, and luckily for us, all these things are debated in the public fora. But even if I compare to 10 years ago, when I look back in boards, the top 3 priorities would be focus in the business. What is the business focus? What is the strategic leadership? And people would be mindful of sustainability because this word had started coming into the dictionary about sustainability. Sustainability is not just about carbon and so on. It's about safety in the factories. It's about long life for the company. It's about community service through CSR. All that I'm including under the head. It's called ESG to be more precise, environment and sustainability of governance. But today, when I look at boards, of course, I've reduced the number of boards I serve on. But when I look at the priorities of the boards, the number 1 is people connect. Are we connecting with our people? Are we in touch with the realities of our organization? The second one is sustainability. Because whether you like it or not, financial institutions are demanding and they will not invest in companies which are not showing sufficient savviness and sustainability. And the regulatory penalties and societal penalties are very heavy. And the third is people are considerably stretched to rethink their business models because digitization is affecting everything. You can't sell soap and shampoo the way I learned to sell it 50 years ago anymore without talking about e-commerce and supply chain reorientation. So the point I'm making is there's been a significant change in the environment in which boards are functioning. And given the fact that there's an inherited tradition of a tension between promoter directors, non-executive directors, independent directors, the road ahead can be very exciting and rewarding. It can also be frustrating and unfruitful. So I would like to share 1 or 2 thoughts about how to make it more enjoyable and rewarding rather than treat it as a liability. Let me say a word about ESG because some people feel that this is too much of a fuss being made about ESG and is it really that bad, and let the Western countries play their role. And COP26 doesn't encourage anybody to take that too seriously. The fact of the matter is this: when you look back over the last 200 years, 300 years, when our predecessors or ancestors wanted land to farm or to raise taxes from, they engaged in warfare. So there was a need and there was a tool. You wanted land, you engaged in warfare. And the history of our own country or any other country is full of these examples. When we wanted mechanical power, we unleashed coal. At that time, coal was the darlingest of industries, not so now anymore. When later in the century we wanted efficient energy, we discovered oil and gas. And now those have also become controversial for their own reasons. When we wanted peace in the Second World War, we unleashed the atom. But that has multiple ramifications And nuclear is not necessarily the prettiest word in today's dictionary. When we wanted speed of data, of decision making, of information, we invented the electron and unleashed the electron. Today, IT is the sexiest industry. But I can tell you, like COP26 has set a target for 2070, at that time, electronic waste will be far more of a worry for boards and governments and humanity than coal and steam, because we would have got our carbon dioxide under control. But the amount of electronic waste that will be coming out. Today's darling industry, information technology, will become tomorrow's disaster. Could become. I shouldn't say will become, because I am not. So I think it is important to recognize that in one form or another, ESG has always existed. But its manifestation has changed over a period of time. From the early part of the Industrial Revolution, when it focused on workers' rights, safety. Remember, I said ESG is a much broader term. It's not just about carbon dioxide. And then it came into workers' working rules, leave, provident fund, pension. From labor rights, it came to labor safety. From labor safety, it moved to community service. From community service, it has gradually moved on, and ESG is a much wider thing now. Let me close my remarks, but nothing in the world is a perfect answer. And I reflect on the fact that there is, so that we can open up for questioning, by saying something about no writing or thinking that I am aware of, or not sufficient writing. How can boards prepare for the emerging situation? And thinking on what is wisdom as a director. There are so many rules. What is it that I try to think about and follow? It has helped me. It's not a perfect answer. Rules and regulations, compliance occupies everybody's time. And the whole field of corporate governance is filled up with accountants and lawyers and CFAs. So company secretaries. And so am I satisfying all the requirements? Get tick in the box. Have I got enough independent directors? Have the independent directors have a chance to have a chat once in a year? Then you send in your corporate governance report and it's done and dusted. The truth of the matter is that people who come into the boardroom are assumed to be wise. And wisdom is assumed to come with age and gray hair. So if I've got as much gray hair as I've got on my head, I'm assumed to be wise. If I say I've had 50 years experience, I'm assumed to be wise. But in reality, all old people are not wise and all young people are not unwise. Just like all old people are not mature, neither are all young people immature. We must dissect this word wisdom somewhat differently. And I want to share with you how my mind is working. I would very much like in your 4th Corporate Governance Summit, if I may be bold enough to make a suggestion to the organizers, you should have a Corporate Governance Summit on how to create a wise director. Instead of getting lost in the jungle of regulations and company secretaries, which is all very important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying those are unimportant. But it's like all the time thinking about how to clean your body and wear clean clothes, which is important. But it's also important to know once you've worn your clean clothes, what is it that you're going to contribute when you step out of your house? And it's that part of it that I'm coming to. If you go back in Vedanta, Vedanta says there's a human mind, and there's a human intellect. The mind is the first stop. It produces an instant reaction. So if I meet you somewhere and you raise your hand against me, I will recoil. That's the mind telling me, be careful. But if you come and slap me on my back like an old friend, I don't recoil. Because I know that you're an old friend, and my intellect, which is a higher order thinking, tells me this is my good old buddy from college days. I don't need to recoil. So the act of raising your hand itself is seen differently by the mind and the intellect. And in fact, Vedanta says we tend to react with our mind all the time. and we should use our intellect, which is the center for reasoning and logic. And that's where the tarka vitarka happens. That is where people are able to raise questions and debate it. Daniel Kahneman says the same thing, but in a different way. He is not a Vedantic scholar. He says we have a system one thinking and a system two thinking. And the system one thinking is the instant reaction, and the system two thinking is the more reasoned. And Daniel Kahneman got the Nobel Prize for it. Our ancestors invented mind and intellect in Vedanta long before the Nobel Prize was even thought about or invented. So there is a body of knowledge available. I don't think one is superior to the other. Depending on your taste, you can study Vedanta for this, read Swami Parthasarathy's book on this, mind and intellect, or read Daniel Kahneman's book on system one and system two thinking. There is also a third book which is coming from the neuroscience point of view. And it talks of low ground thinking and high ground thinking. Low ground doesn't mean it is inferior to high ground thinking. It is just a point in the brain, you know. Low ground happens at this level, high ground happens at that level. That is the sort of difference. It's a physical location rather than a commentary on its value. The low ground thinking is what they call transactional thinking. And the high ground thinking is what is called strategic thinking. So it's much the same as mind and intellect, system one, system two, low ground. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
All right. The screen has suddenly changed. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So long as you can hear me and see me, it's okay. I think very often people who got backgrounds in law and company secretary and accountants tend to get into the transactional thinking. Very important work, by the way. I'm not poo-pooing it. Audit and have you done this? Is there maker, checker, balance? Is there this, that? And boards get bogged down with transactional kind of questions. And there are officers who are trained in these to be able to answer it. But the strategic level of thinking gets lost in the process. And I'm encouraging a wise directors engage in a lot of strategic discussion. It's like finishing your bath quickly and figuring out what you want to do during the day, which is useful to society and other people, than spending your whole day having a bath and a shave and cleaning up and getting good clothes. Now, this point about wisdom is very easy to talk about, but I need to say, why am I emphasizing it so much? I'm emphasizing it so much because if wisdom doesn't come with age, if it doesn't come with experience, how does it come? Well, to my mind, and I'm not being technical, physiological in my comment, wisdom is like a muscle. As you get older, your biceps get weaker, right? And people who are past 50 are told to do some light weights so that their body, Mr. Raj is a runner and an athlete. He will tell you that you can't just get up in the morning and go. And the stretching exercises that he has to do now is far more than when it was 25 years ago. In the same way, wisdom is like a muscle. You have to exercise it. And you have to exercise it with questions that you ask and debate. And that's how wisdom comes, to get a different perspective. I mean, you take the example of the Volkswagen Dieselgate. I mean, all of us know the case. I don't have to describe it. Those guys were all past 60, 65. They were hallowed names in the field of automotive industry and corporate governance. How could they agree to fudging the results? You take Rajat Gupta, insider trading. I mean, he's not exactly a pushover, a very fine person, but for a moment, there was a short circuit in the electrical circuit here, and wisdom departed. You take the Wirecard, which is a financial paper in Germany. They had a fraud recently, and you wonder what happened to these people. So the important thing is this, that you have to exercise your muscle by studying cases and finding why suddenly there's a short circuit in the brain and wisdom departs. And there are two principal avenues in which I would encourage you to think about it. One is that you get so bogged down in transactional thinking, left brain thinking, system one thinking. If you have a board full of, I'm not criticizing accountants, but I'm just saying their training is that way. Accountants and lawyers and company secretaries train in transactional materials because that's their role in the company. Then you can get lost in that. The second method is to have an alter ego. I call it the Clementine Mirror. Somebody in the board should be able to say, hey, what if it's different? And I call it Clementine because Clementine was the wife of Winston Churchill. And when Winston Churchill became intolerably bullying during the Second World War, Clementine would go and tell him, Winnie, you're treating your people badly. You should mend your ways. So it had a calming influence. Or my wife is my Clementine. I'll be surprised if it could be a wife, it could be a husband, if you're a woman. It could be your brother or sister or your boss. But if you don't have a Clementine is a psychological mirror, just like optical mirror shows you your face. If you put an optical mirror in front of my face, I know that I have gray hair, I have warts, moles. Who's going to hold a psychological mirror, especially if I'm the CEO of the company or a director of the company? I think I'm God. So you need a Clementine who will be able. So a combination of exercising your muscle and having a Clementine mirror are good ways. And I want to close my comments and open up for questions with just an example. If all this sounds very mysterious to the audience, saying this guy is talking big about philosophy. Listen, when India unfortunately got partitioned in 1947, for reasons of history which all of us know, one side took the view that we want to be an Islamic country. The other side took the view we don't want to be a Hindu country. And to this day, the stated position of this country is we want to be a secular country. They have chosen the more efficient way to deal with dissent. We have chosen the more effective way. But ours looks more muddled. But it's the more durable one. It is a more sustainable one. And I think India is a very good example of system two thinking or strategic thinking and maintaining it for 70 years, by the way, despite a few pressures here and there, which is not the subject of our discussion. But our neighbor went, or our younger brother has gone some other direction. You see what happened when South Africa broke away with apartheid. The story is very well known that there were a lot of people who were saying, let's fix the whites. And Nelson Mandela said he wore a Springboks soccer team t-shirt. And there's a very nice movie made on that. He used to make a thing called soda ash. Soda ash is pumping out seawater and evaporating the water, and just to show that we are a rainbow nation. India is the world's greatest rainbow nation, far more than taking out the masala that is left and purifying it in some way to make what is called soda ash or sodium carbonate, South Africa. And therefore, these are all examples of system two things. The glass that you wear on your spectacles, the glass that's sitting in the bottle of water in front of you, the glass under your... And a last example, since we mentioned ESG, I used to be the vice chairman of Tata Chemicals. And for a week table, the automotive glass that you have all have soda ash in it. Now, it's a very energy expensive way of doing it because you're evaporating a lot of seawater to get to the soda ash. Nature has created soda ash mines, natural. You just scrape it off the sides of mountains or from the bottom of little lakes and dry it. And Tata Chemicals was very keen with the energy becoming very expensive. So we suddenly got an opportunity after waiting for 15 years that in Tanzania, we would go and get mining lease for Lake Natron, where you could get soda ash. You just mine it from the bottom of the lake and then dry it and you get soda ash. We were very excited, and as a member of the board, I supported the idea of the management that we should go and explore it. I think we had spent about $5-10 million already, and you know that looks very small in the context of nowadays. IPOs come out, people become billions before you say Jack Robinson. But $5-10 million was quite a lot of money 25 years ago. Still is a lot of money for a company to. But we did it. Somewhere at the time we were exploring this lake, we stumbled upon something which was not known to us, that it is a nesting spot for the little flamingo. And we said, what the hell is a little flamingo? So chemical engineers and chemists and accountants and lawyers started to learn about the little flamingo. And we found that if you start mining there, you may destroy the habitat of the little flamingo. And we discussed it at the board. This is what an example of wisdom. And 3 board members said, what will our children or grandchildren in this company think? 2050, that we went and destroyed the little flamingo and got some soda ash out of it? Is that the kind of company we want to run? That became a Clementine Mirror. A debate started. And the company, I'm very proud of this, I'm party to that decision, took if you had to write off $10 million, we write it off. That year, our share prices collapsed because they said take an exceptional item. But I think we did the right thing. So I just wanted to give these as the examples of wisdom, that to exercise that muscle, you require a Clementine and you require discussion and debate. If you don't have this and you have autocracies, you will not get the appropriate results. The time allotted to me or indicated to me is over. I would like to stop. I can go on talking, but I should not. After 50 years, you have this tendency to keep on talking. Raj Kalur is a talented runner. He can conduct a marathon. He's got 20 minutes left, 25 minutes. Raj, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for a very, very erudite address. Really very impressive, very woo Vedanta with Daniel 2's thinking fast and slow, and system 1 and system 2 thinking. And as well as, you brought upon that principle of wisdom, where it applies and how it applies. But let me again, come back to what you mentioned about Tata Chemicals as towards the end, but also, in the beginning, you kind of introduced the topic with effectiveness and efficiency. And in today's world, I mean, and we are, partly, we are responsible for the rules that we are framing, but typically the promoters of or the management of a company today is, has a limited tenure, and in that limited tenure, they need to show results, and then they have to approach the shareholders. And in that, state of where you would say that every quarter they have to publish results. So in that sense, I mean, do you see an overriding factor for boards to become more efficient rather than effectiveness? In a sense, our entire incentive system is more tilted towards the efficiency of working rather than creating effectiveness for the longer term. Really privileged to have your views on that.
Thank you. That's a good question. And I hope your CFA association in Pune, chapter in Pune, will try to do something about having wiser directors. And when you do have any program for your members on wisdom, get a mother. And I'm not joking, I'm being very serious. Get a mother to come and talk about how she raises her children. I've watched my wife raising our 3 children. But now my children are in their 40s and grown up, so I've forgotten it all. But I'm seeing my daughters and daughter-in-law raising their children. And this is a much calmer time for me to observe. A mother has got hassles. She's really got hassles. Every night that baby cries for a feed, for colic and this and that, etc. She's very harassed at that time. But no mother stops dreaming about the long term. Then mera beta lawyer banega, meri beti CFA banegi. I've never known a mother who has not dreamt, who has thought about it. Right? Now, how does a mother think of the short term and the long term simultaneously without losing her sanity? That's the kind of wisdom you require in a board director. Be like a mother. And I'm not glorifying women for the heck of it. It's a live example. I can guarantee no man is capable of doing what a woman can do while she's raising a baby. He's damn lucky he doesn't have to do it. So you just I'm watching my daughters and daughter-in-law. And I say, wow, I wish directors would do this. Think of the short and long term simultaneously. Don't sacrifice the long term for the short term. You see, when a man thinks of how to solve a problem, he will Google it and become a Ponga Pandit. Okay? When a woman wants to solve a problem about why her baby is crying, Padmini will ring up Ragini, Ragini will ring up Tarang, Tarang will ring up somebody else, and she'll put all this together and find a solution. I'm seeing my daughters do it. And you ask her, and her husband is sitting with Dr. Spock in his hand. And she says, put that away. The baby is crying. I don't have time to look at Dr. Spock. And she solved the problem, by the way, because Tarang and Padmini and Ragini and Yamini have given her a solution. So I think one attribute of wisdom is learning from harried mothers. And I would encourage you to, it may seem irrelevant and stupid, but I am a great admirer of young mothers and what they can teach men.
I think that's a very great insight there, sir. And that also potentially leads to another question here. I mean, of course, you mentioned about diversity and India as a diverse nation. But what about diversity in boardrooms? I mean, that's an important thing which you raised, maybe indirectly, in terms of saying that we be like a harried mother. I mean, would having, I would say, in this case, a gender diversity in the boardroom be a part of the solution to that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Not only gender diversity, any other parameters, don't have fill it up with accountants from very storied firms, he's PwC, he's ENY. Don't fill it up with all those guys. Have one or two of them. Like have salt and pepper on your fried eggs. Just have a little bit of them. But too many accountants, too many lawyers, or too many marketing people, too much of anything is bad. And one of the important things about handling diversity that I have learned, again, I am finding practical ways. If you go to a professor of management in Symbiosis or somewhere, they'll give you a gyan. And the gyan will sound very good at the time they're giving it to you, but you don't know what to do with it next morning. But I'm sure you will not forget to watch your wife or your sister or whoever is the young harried mother in your own social circles. Here's the second one, which happened to me when I was very young. Prakash Tandon used to be the chairman of my company. And we were little puppies, 1967. So I'm talking a real long time. And he had this practice that I'm sitting as a chairman. If I don't keep in touch with young people, I won't know what's happening. At that time, he was 59. So he would call us for lunch. And it was a terrifying experience because we had just come out of some hostel somewhere, going in your Hawaii chappal and eating with your hand with thalis. And here was Hindustan Lever, 5th floor boardroom. The carpets were so thick that we would sink into the carpet. We could not get ourselves out of the car. We are probably wearing a borrowed suit also. Mr. Tandon asked one of us, how many ears do you have? So he said, sir, we have 2. He said, how many mouths do you have? He said, 1. He said, what's the surface area of your ear compared to your mouth? We said, twice. So he said, you have 4 times the surface area on your ear compared to your mouth. I said, yes. So far, we passed them. We thought it's a maths test. He said, you should listen 4 times more than you speak. Point he's making. So you must learn to listen. You look at the public discourse, political discourse. Now, diversity means that. I may not agree with, we want to see impatience in listening. And if you want to see people with multiple mouths, I see names like Nimisha and Shagun there. I may not agree with them, but just because they're women, I can't. Only 1 ear, which is small. Go and watch TV this evening. It's a lesson on how to put them down. Why? Even for a man. Just because I see Rajendra and I don't like his face or I don't like the point, how not to be in a boardroom.
So one more question, basically, I picked one from the audience, and they said, of course, you narrated the story on Tata Chemicals, but in your experience, have you seen the attitude? Given the illustrations that you mentioned and the virtues of having a diverse board, independent board, have you seen the promoters' attitude changing over a period of time from a level of, say, skepticism or maybe, at the beginning might be downright hostility, to actually appreciating the role that independent directors have and maybe the value that they provide in the boardroom?
Yes, I have. That's a good sign. Not all of them are still Lalajis. Initially, there was a bit of a Lalaji attitude. I think is diminishing. Whether they are doing nakra or they've genuinely changed is a matter for debate. But these take time to change. You don't change overnight. If I am a short-tempered fellow, I'm short-tempered. My wife will tell me, but nobody else will tell me. So people will change their attitudes.
So any particular instances of companies that you work with? Not naming the company, of course, for if you feel like
Of what? Of the
on the attitude changing and how it changed. I mean, what would be the circumstances that led to it?
Well, I can't say the attitude changed,
Yeah.
but when I joined Tata's, in one of the major companies, you don't mind if I don't mention the name of the company,
Yeah, sure.
um, the management came with a proposal to diversify into a completely different area. Okay, say you're in motor cars, you want to go into telecom, something like that. You see this happening every morning when you read the newspapers. On the grounds that the traditional business is risky with government price control. I'm talking of those years. One independent director spoke up very strongly. He says, I think this is wrong. We should spend our time doing better, what we are damn good at, than trying to learn the ropes of something we know nothing about. And he prevented that company from investing in some other industry which is unrelated. And in hindsight, of course, it became a gossiping point. Isne isko rok liya proposal ko, because that's the way we think, transactional thinking. But I think he did a great favor to the company, and it was never held against him that he stopped it. So it's one good example. I can give one more example if I may, but this has nothing to do with independent directors. When I used to be in Hindustan Lever, we had a tea plantation in Assam called Dumduma. And you remember the Ulfa days back in the 90s, 80s. An unfortunate situation arose. We had been sticking to our guns as a company, saying we will not pay Ulfa. And Ulfa sent a death threat to our manager and his family in Dumduma. And there was panic, understandably. And they said, we'll kidnap your non-Assamese people and etc., etc. We had quite a heated debate, but one person in the board spoke up. He said, if we can't stand up for our people now, there's no point making a speech after 1 year. We've got to stand up for them now. So somebody flew down. We met the people in Delhi, right at the senior most levels, got an Indian Air Force helicopter and airlifted all our people secretly overnight, like a war operation. I felt very proud that day that here was a company, Hindustan Lever, which is not just saying we care for our people. It's actually done it at the time it matters. So 2 examples that come to my mind I've mentioned.
So let me then switch back to some ESG issues. And, largely the belief is that it's the investor activism, that's the institutional investor activism that is leading to more companies getting into ESG and, trying to be, environmentally more conscious and, trying to be a good corporate citizen. But in India, we see that most of them are family owned and promoters who own the majority stake. So where do you see, how does the consciousness of, sustainability, environmental, as well as the governance come into play with, almost 65% of the economy being controlled by family owned businesses?
I think I wonder whether I would agree with you that investor activists, everything that investors are activists for doesn't necessarily affect the management. Look at the controversy in Z Entertainment. There's an investor and an activist, but it's having absolutely no effect on the promoter who holds 4% of the shareholding and has thrown every single lawyer and law book. And maybe with good merit, it's not for me to judge, and certainly not at this conference. So people take the investor pressures also in their stride. I think the awakening has to come from the directors, the board, about ESG. And I gave you the example of Tata Chemicals because that's a very, very striking example. But the example of people adapting safety, take industrial safety. 25 years ago, अरे दो चार आदमी मर गया, वो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट लेबर था, कोई बात नहीं है. He's not factory labor. You know, I have participated in such conversations. I'm not proud of what I'm saying, but I have to admit it. Today, I'll chop off my tongue or chop off the tongue of a director who says, oh, he's contract labor, chalega. So I think it takes time for enlightenment and awareness to lead to enlightenment. And we are in that process with ESG also. There will be guys who have raped the environment, but they will learn from it. And next time around, they will take their decisions differently, whether it's due to government pressure or societal pressure or investor pressure.
So one other question I think that I want to pick up is, how does corporate governance be strengthened? I mean, do you see, the way to this is through regulation? Of course, I just mentioned about shareholder activism, which you disagreed, or is it due to promoter conviction?
Sorry, shareholder activism, I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying it's one of the sources.
Okay.
But here is my view. It's a very good question you asked, and I'm writing my new book on exactly this subject, so it's fresh and big names. Until a guy with background in psychology came along, sloshing in my head. I call it behavioral corporate governance. If you look at the field of economics and said, there's a behavioral part to economics. 25 years ago or 30 years ago, economics was about models, economics also, how consumers behave. And Amos Tversky, econometrics and mathematics and social change theory, blah, blah, blah. Famous, one died, the other one got the Nobel Prize. And today the field of behavioral economics is up and bubbling. Corporate governance has been taken over by the lawyers and the accountants. Not because they are bad people, don't get me wrong, because somebody has given them the task to keep framing laws. You can go on framing laws. There's a limit to clarity also. Because by the very definition of law, it is supposed to embed its lack of clarity. Otherwise, lawyers will be out of business. There'll be no need for lawyers. It's not possible. So you'll always have an embedded dysfunctional intelligence inside lawmaking, law writing. Likewise with accounting, interpretation. So what is to be written off? What is to be adjusted against future profits? These are all open questions. And people earn lots of money trying to give advice on these things. So what is required is behavioral corporate governance. And behavioral corporate governance means understanding that human behavior is based on cultural aspects and not legal aspects. If I respect a particular chairman, I'm just taking the name of Ratan Tata for argument, but my example has nothing to do with Ratan Tata or Tatas for that matter. And I say, बाप रे बाप, Ratan Tata आ गया है, मेरा जबान खींच लेता हूँ, तो बोर्ड मीटिंग में मैं क्या कहूँगा? Because मेरा जो culture है, it is, you must be respectful to elders, you must be respectful to wise people like Ratan Tata or Keshav Mahindra or whoever else, Now that's cultural. And how do you speak up against that? And when I use the word cultural, I always give this example. When Hanuman was caught and taken to the court of Ravana in Lanka, and everybody was saying, kill this guy, this monkey, because he has burnt our city, and Ravana's eyes were rolling, like some of our promoter CEOs and promoters. Who spoke up? Vibhishana spoke up. And Vibhishana said, boss, under clause 2.3, you don't kill a messenger. You can hurt him. And then they wound up his tail and set fire to it, and you know that story. So it is possible to speak. But when Vibhishana addressed Ravana, he said, oh Ravana, you're such a wise man. You've got boons from all the gods. So bolo aisa. Modi ji, aapke jaise koi hai hi nahi avatar. Lekin, farmer ka jo law hai, ye kharab hai. Or whatever you have to say, depends on the subject. I think it is an extremely important question you raise, and I am trying to reflect on the behavioral aspects of corporate governance, which is an unexplored subject. And by no means am I an expert on it. But the moment you can convert a little bit of psychology and human behavior knowledge to accountants and lawyers and marketing people, I think you'll have a better form of corporate governance. And that's the future.
So the last question that I wanted to ask is, I can see on the background, the book Pivots for Career Success. And as you know, there are a lot of young charter holders listening to you and wanting to seek advice in terms of how to chart out a growth path for the careers. So what do you want to, as an advice to these young charter holders and making a career in the financial industry?
Well, I don't know if I can give such a instant dosa mix for them. Maybe they can buy my book. But the essence of the book is you have been trained to think as a young engineer, chartered financial, whatever, lawyer. You've been trained to think that it's mastery of technical details that will give you success. But once you start working, you'll find that it's mastery of human behavior that will give you success, because everybody can learn the technical details. And you see that sometimes HR people are the most unpopular in the company, although they're called HR, because they'll throw the rule book at you. Lawyers are the most unpopular because they'll throw some section 1, 2, 3 at you. And the marketing guy may be the most popular guy because he says, yaar, ye kaam karana hai, jara rasta nikalo. And I think understanding human behavior and how to deal with it. So I can't do it, but I'm sure some of your people are born teachers.
Thanks.
Understanding how to listen, understanding how to disagree without becoming disagreeable are qualities which we don't teach.
Sir, I mean, I wish that this could go on. It's been really interesting, and
teach our people. In fact, I would like the CFA Institute to see it, how to run a behavioral program.
Experience that comes with wisdom, I think, is
for your young people.
Yeah.
I'm not a teacher.
Priceless thing, and it's very difficult to imbibe everything, but clearly very, very insightful that the nuggets that you shared, and we hope we could listen to you again very soon. But over to you, Nimisha, after this very erudite address from Sir Gopalkrishnan, and we look forward to the next session again, which is on independent directors, a report we released in APAC. But over to you, Nimisha, for that. And thank you, sir, for your valuable time. Really appreciate, and look forward to your coming book as well, forthcoming book. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.